Right. So we're in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're in chapter 24 called Pandit Shashadhar. It's Wednesday, June 25th, 1884. And the master is having a conversation with M. And if you remember that Ramakrishna had just finished saying a very beautiful thing, that you may discriminate for millions of years about God's attributes and still you will not know them. And then he sits, the master remained silent for a few moments, and we kind of left sitting in that silence last week because that's a beautiful moment. When you hear something like that, or when that thought comes through your mind, it's a very sacred moment. And, I love when I catch little phrases like that in the gospel. They get my attention immediately because I think that brings out what it was to sit in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna. That these profound teachings that we very easily read over because all we're getting is text. We're not seeing the life of the man living in front of us. We're not feeling the energy behind his words. We're not seeing those glassy, holy eyes penetrating us as he's saying these things. And the profundity of him being, in some people's eyes, one with God, that he and God were not different at that point. And to be in the presence of someone like that and have them tell you something like this personally to your face, you can discriminate about God about God's attributes for millions of years, and you will still not know them. And then to sit silently, that just kind of soaks into you and you realize what you're in the presence of. You realize the nature of the divine, of the invitation, the nature of the grace that you've been given, the opportunity that you've been given. And so the master now is still talking to M, and he continues, there is no substance whatsoever in worldly life. The members of Ishan's family are good, so he has peace here. Suppose his sons had been lewd and disobedient and addicted to drinking and other vices, then there would have been no end to his troubles. One very seldom comes across such a religious family in which all the members are so devoted to God. I have seen only 2 or 3 such families. Generally, one finds quarrels, misunderstandings, jealousy, and friction. Besides, there are disease and grief and poverty in the world. Seeing this condition, I pray to the Divine Mother, O Mother, turn my mind at once from the world to God. And that is the practice right there. As we watch the world burn in its own embers, as life goes on, that's one of the things I was pondering the other day. There was no cause for it. I was just pondering life. And I remember being a teenage boy, or just preteen actually, and sitting in the back of a car as we were driving past a cornfield and thinking about growing up, thinking about being an adult and how wonderful the world felt to me at that time in my life, that, at that age where you're just presented with this grand, big white canvas and all the colors you need to paint on it. And you just have an idea of how inspiring this is all going to be. And then life happens, life happens. And little by little, these aspirations of amazing greatness that you imagined for yourself and fulfillment of your dreams and the perfect family that came to your mind and the perfect marriage and the perfect friends and, what you were going to do with the money you were going to make and, all of those things, little by little, they're whittled down to usually a very ordinary life. And if you're lucky, an ordinary life, I think there's a great blessing in having an ordinary life because you have ordinarily sized problems and challenges, and you have the time to sit before the beloved. If you get one of those grandiose visions of life and you actually get that, how much more difficult is it to sort through all of that energy and find the divine, find the beloved, But nonetheless, these things are dismantled. Mother starts at our very birth. teaching us, training us, first showing us the ideal, which causes us to dream and to mistake the world for being the answer to that dream. And the trick is to let the world teach you that just what Thakur is saying here, there is no substance here. There is no substance whatsoever here. There is nothing here for you to dream of or to dream for. There is nothing. And if we're lucky, if we love God and we stick to that love above all things, then we arrive to this prayer that Thakur just prayed. Mother, turn my mind at once from this world to God. Show me the source of these dreams. Show me that in me which inspired these visions of greatness for this life. And remember the purity of being a child, of being young, of being utterly taken care of, if that was your circumstance. And use that to go deep within yourself and find the source of your childhood dreams. Find the beloved behind them. Find that which you were trying to express in the world that was sitting before you. He says, look at Narendra's troubles, Swami Vivekananda. His father is dead and the members of his family are starving. He has been trying his utmost to secure a job, but he has not yet found one. Just see how unsettled his mind is. Vivekananda, this was one of the most profound moments of his life, I imagine, that his father had died. His family was literally starving. There was no one to provide money for them. And he was being inspired to renounce. He was being inspired to walk away from worldly life. And he truly felt, he says in one of his letters, that he was condemning his family to die of starvation by his renouncing the world. But he said, I was powerless against it. There was nothing else I could do, because he hears this call that Ramakrishna is praying. Turn my mind to God, away from this world. There is no substance here whatsoever. And that depth. It continues to M. You used to come to Dakshineshwar very frequently, but why have you become such a rare visitor? Perhaps you have become particularly friendly with your wife. Is it true? Why should I blame you? The influence of woman and gold is everywhere. Therefore I pray, O Divine Mother, please don't make me a worldly man if I am to be born again in a human body. That's still his prayer, that I might not catch this disease of worldliness that makes you chase phantoms, things that leave you alone to die on your deathbed. Brahmin scholar says, why should you say that, sir? The scriptures extol the life of a householder. The master, yes, that is true. But it is very difficult to lead the true life of a householder. To M, how wrong of us. They are singing, especially Narendra, and we have left the room. So yes, to live the true life of a householder, and that's what we often forget. The life of a householder is not permission just to go and enjoy the world and keep your little devotions going on the side. The householder life and monastic life are just different techniques of the same life. In the householder world, you renounce inwardly and you use your experience of life to discern and to be taught your renunciation from your experience. You marry one person so that you don't fall into the trap of thinking it's the person that's wrong. And then you spend the rest of your life wandering, looking for the right person. You choose that one person, you choose that family, and little by little, just through the nature of having a family and being responsible, your ego is expanded to include more and more people besides just yourself, And by that practice of taking care of your wife as your beloved, and taking care of your children as your beloved, and taking care of your children's children's and your children's spouses as your beloved, and taking care of their friends and your circle and their schools and their friends' parents and families, that as a householder, your path is to expand, 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 expand until you reach the same ideal. Everyone is my child. Everyone is my family. Everyone is my responsibility, and I will live for their benefit and their welfare. That's householder life. It's not a compromise. It's not a lesser path. It is as difficult and as strenuous if it's being done rightly. And it's more difficult and more strenuous if it's not being done rightly, right? Someone once asked me, what is the harder path? The path of a monk or the path of a householder? And I had to sit and think for a moment. I was at Shanti Ashrama, and it was a man named Prakash that asked me that question. And I said to him, Prakash, I think that probably the monk's life is harder. But I said, I think that the householder life is more painful. Each one has its difficulty. It's hard to renounce the world. It's hard not to be in these situations that we find ourselves in, and to have no permission for self-actualization, to have no permission for doing your own thing. That's the challenge of monastic life, and that never goes away. It's always there. And so it has its challenges, but the householder life, you're in the middle of the things you're renouncing, and you're constantly having to let go of them over and over and over again. Your children grow up and then they leave your house, and you lose your job, or something disappoints you. It just goes on. It's like continually things are plucked from your hands over and over and over again. So both of them, though, are paths to realization. Both of them end in a relationship with the beloved, with the divine. All of them end in an accounting of your choices as you lay there thinking about your life as it slips away. This is the nature of it. So yes, it is true, but it is very difficult to lead the true householder's life. Right? And then he says, look, here we are having this private conversation, and Narendra is singing devotional songs. Let's go to the other room and be in the moment. Let's step out of the story and the questions, and let's go into the devotion, right, to what the moment is offering us. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the master left in a carriage for the house where Pandit Shashadhar was staying. As soon as Sri Ramakrishna got into the carriage, he went into samadhi. His physical frame was very tender as a result of the austerities he had undergone during the long years of his spiritual discipline and his constant absorption in God consciousness. This, if you read the Great Master, you really know more of what he's saying here. Long years of practice. That Thakur, the one thing that was stunning to me in reading about his austerities in the Great Master was that there was nothing, literally nothing, that he wouldn't do for his relationship with the beloved. The things he trained that he had to do, that he had to ingest human flesh. He had to ingest feces. These are shocking things to say. Put them in the proper context. If you want to hear them for proper context, read the Great Master. It's not about the shock value, and it's not about that. What it is about is how dedicated he was to his practice, that whatever was required of it to know God, to find God, he was willing to do it. And with the human flesh thing, he says I could only manage just to barely touch it to my tongue.
Swami, what was that about human flesh? Who is this?
That in one of the tantric practices, you have to get rid of all aversion, right? And to get rid of that aversion, you have to confront it, and you have to discern. There is no difference between this piece of meat and a cow's piece of meat, and a lamb's piece of meat, and a chicken's piece of meat, and a fish piece of meat. That there is no difference. This is all Brahman. But through the tantric practices that he was going at the time, it's not enough to just say that. You have to demonstrate it to yourself. That's why that great seer that when I can't remember the names, someone chased him down the road trying to get some teaching from him. Thakur had said he was a realized soul. And when that man finally turns around and says, when you know that the water, the ditch water here and the water of the Ganges are not different, then you will know the truth. Now, being in Calcutta and knowing what ditch water looks like here, there's, literally it's toilet water, it's raw sewage, in some places in that ditch, that there is no difference between that and the holy water in the Ganges. And in Tantra, you have to know that so absolutely it's not a theory, that you would be willing to dip a glass in either one and drink it and not be affected either way by it. That's the level of practice that Thakur was at. That was the level of the purity of mind that he was at. There was no story for him. You hand him this glass of water, it wasn't a story. I laugh because immediately I'm thinking of other times where he couldn't drink a glass of water because of the person who handed it to him. So both aspects are there. And somehow, as devotees, we have to ponder that and put that together somehow. So because of his long years of spiritual discipline and his constant absorption in God consciousness, and what that's pointing to there, I don't know, sometimes, we've had a good meditation and you feel that surge of energy inside, right? I think that's fairly common. At some point in our life, we accidentally have a good meditation and we touch that live wire just for a split second inside and we get that surge of energy, that surge of emotion. And so when I read this, I'm taking that surge of emotion and I'm making it a constant surge of emotion, a constant surge of energy that his body and that he had to contend with, that he had to absorb and carry on while having this intensity of experience within him constantly at all times. And so it had its effect on the body, the frame of the body.
Swami.
Yes.
Swami Sharananda in the Great Master says that our bodies are like ordinary light bulbs. He said Thakur's nerves were so refined he could handle like 10,000 watts of energy going through it, whereas we can handle maybe 15. He said his nervous system was so refined and so powerful from all that practice,
Yeah, no, that's why we give our lives to it. That's why. The master would suffer from the slightest physical discomfort and even from the vibration of worldly thoughts around him. Once Keshab Chandra Sen had said that Sri Ramakrishna, Christ, and Sri Chaitanya belonged to a delicate species of humanity that should be kept in a glass case and protected from the vulgar contact of the world. I don't think any of those people mentioned would agree with that. But they are that valuable as people, that look, history has not let go of them. The human mind, how many people have died with their memories in the last 2,000 years, and still the thought of Christ is in our minds, in our heads. How many people since Buddha, how many people since Rama, how many people since Krishna, and yet that information, that inspiration, that story of them has persisted in the human mind from generation to generation to generation to generation. How can we ever say there isn't something there? That there wasn't something immensely rare, immensely pure, immensely beautiful, that it would roll through the history of the world for the rest of its days. That's the thing that always, with Thakur, I'm particularly amazed because it's so contemporary. I walk over to Dakshineshwar when I got here and I sat there looking at it. I thought, this is such a little temple. And it's not even unique on its block. There's other temples up and down the street, some of them bigger and more beautiful than this one. I said, and he didn't live any kind of extraordinary life. He was just a temple priest, he did puja in the shrine here every day. That was his job. He didn't do any seminars. He didn't do any conventions. He didn't write any books. He didn't do any vlogs. He didn't record his lectures on YouTube. You know, he just lived day to day a very, by any measure, a very ordinary life, except for who he was in it, except for what ordinary was for him. And now me on the other side of the world, some 150 years later, was just from that ordinary life inspired to give up everything that I had going at that point in my life and to walk away from it. Because of that, this is the power that they're talking about here. This is the opportunity of our grace. This is the party that you have a ticket to, you know, and just for a moment to be reminded of this. Just for a moment to try and hold this and digest this, and just for a moment to see how freely it's been given to us. It was the rainy season, and a fine drizzle of rain had made the road muddy. The sky was overcast. The devotees followed the carriage on foot. As the carriage stopped in front of the house, the host and his relatives welcomed the master and took him upstairs to the drawing room. There, the master met the pundit. Okay, now this is significant, right? Because what do we have going on here? Here we have an external manifestation of an internal reality happening. Why do I say that? Where does God dwell? Ramakrishna says, the heart of the devotee is the drawing room of God. So when the scriptures here say that the host and his relatives welcomed the master, they took him upstairs to the drawing room, and the master met the pundit. This is going on inside of you right now. This is the scene that is unfolding in front of you. Your inner teacher is sitting with Ramakrishna in the drawing room of your heart. Pandit Shashadhar, a man of fair complexion and no longer young, had a That is how I'm going to describe myself from now on. You won't let me be old, so I'm just simply going to be no longer young. Pandit Shashadhar, a man of fair complexion and no longer young, had a string of Rudraksha beads around his neck. So he's a spiritual practitioner. He's got a daily practice and something that he carries his beads around to be with him. He was one of the renowned Sanskrit scholars of his time, a pillar of Orthodox Hinduism, which had reasserted itself after the first wave of Christianity and Western culture had passed over Hindu society. His clear exposition of the Hindu scriptures, his ringing sincerity, and his stirring eloquence had brought back a large number of the educated young Hindus of Bengal to the religion of their forefathers, right? And so you can take that and let that story unfold within you, the orthodoxy of your true self. You know, it's dedication to truth, it's dedication to pure love, it's dedication to pure wisdom in being. And it's the fact that it is the divine itself, you know, that there is no accomplishment left undone with it. This is your inner teacher. It's ringing sincerity and it's stirring eloquence within you as it leads you through life, right? The pundit salutes the master. So see your guru, your inner guru, bows down in your heart to the presence of the beloved in your meditation. The pundit saluted the master with reverence. Narendra, Rakal, Ram, Hazra, and M, who had come with the master, seated themselves in the room as near as the master as they could, anxious not to miss one of his words. At the sight of the pundit, the master again went into samadhi. After a while, still remaining in that state, so again, we have one of these moments of silence, of a profound sacredness. You know, Ramakrishna is in samadhi. He is demonstrating the one without a second and what it looks like from the perspective of the ego, from our perspective. We still see a body in front of us. We still see a mind, but there is no body and there is no mind that belongs to Thakur at this moment. He is everyone in the room. He is every thought in the room. He is everything, everywhere, all at once. And this profound silence happens again. After a while, still remaining in that state, he looked at the pundit and said, with a smile, "Very well. Very well." Then addressing the pundit, the master said, "Tell me how you give lectures." The pundit said, "Sir, I try to explain the teachings of the Hindu scriptures." Master, for the Kali Yuga, the path of devotion described by Narada is the best. Where can people find time nowadays to perform their duties according to the scriptural injunctions? Nowadays, the decoctions of roots and herbs and the orthodox Hindu physicians cannot be given to a fever patient. By the time that kind of medicine begins its slow process of curing, the patient is done for. Therefore, only a drastic medicine like the allopathic fever mixture is effective now. You may ask people to practice spiritual rites and rituals, but when prescribing the rituals, remove the head and the tail. I tell people not to bother about the elaborate rituals of the Sandhya as enjoined in the scriptures. I say that it will be enough for them to repeat the Gayatri alone. If you must give instruction about scriptural ceremonies, do so only to a few, like Ishan. So Thakur there in this ecstatic state, still lingering in the knowledge of one without a second, teaching us that love is the fastest way to God in these days, right? That these other things that the scriptures teach, the path, all of this Advaita that we love, fine. He says, teach that to a few, right? And cut off the head and tail. Keep the focus on love. Keep the focus on the love of God, the beloved. Let everything point at that love. Let everything nurture that love. And so when we hear these other scriptures and we hear these other teachings, we let that increase our love for God. We look at them through the eyes of devotion and understand them through the eyes of devotion. And we will be propelled forward in the fastest possible way, Ramakrishna is saying. He continues, you may deliver thousands of lectures, but they won't make the slightest impression on worldly people. This is why we don't want to be worldly people, right? And what are worldly people? Worldly people are just those of us who are looking for happiness outside of ourselves, thinking, still believing that there's something in the world that will fulfill us and make us happy and make our life what we want it to be. A person in that pursuit is a worldly person, and he says you can deliver 1,000 lectures. If you remain committed to that delusion, it will not make the slightest impression on your mind. You will continue to search out those things, right? Can one drive a nail into a stone wall? The point of the nail will sooner break than make a dent in that stone. What will you gain by striking the tough skin of the crocodile with a sword? The sadhu's water bowl, made from the shell of a bitter gourd, may visit the 4 principal holy places of India with its owner, but it will still remain as bitter as ever. Your lectures are not helping worldly people very much, and you will realize this by and by. The calf cannot stand on its legs all at once. Now it drops to the ground, and now it stands up. So it learns to stand, and finally on its legs, it walks. You cannot distinguish a lover of God from a worldly person. It isn't your fault, of course. When the first onrush of the gale shakes the trees, it is impossible to distinguish one tree from another, the mango from the tamarind, for instance. Without having realized God, one cannot give up rituals altogether. So he's saying there is a place for those things. There is a place for them. How long should one practice the Sandhya and other forms of ritualistic worship? As long as one does not shed tears of joy in the name of God and feel a thrill in one's body. You will know that your ritualistic worship has come to an end when your eyes become filled with tears as you repeat Om Rama. Then you do not have to continue your Sandhya or any other rituals, right? So we don't give up any of our practices, any of our pujas, any of our adherences, any of our, whatever our practices are, we don't give them up if one of these signs is not there. that you shed tears of joy, not tears of sentiment, but tears of joy at the name of God, just hearing the name of God. You know, someone says Rama, someone says Ramakrishna, someone says Jesus to you, and you weep for joy because that energy that we're talking about, that Doctor lived with constantly, that rush of emotion, that rush of that intense love to the point of tears in your eyes. When the fruit appears, the blossom drops off. Love of God is the fruit, and the rituals are the blossom. When the daughter-in-law of the house becomes pregnant, she cannot do much work. Her mother-in-law gradually lessens her duties in the house. When her time arrives, she does practically nothing. And after the child is born, her only work is to play with it. She doesn't do any household duties at all. The Sankhya merges in the Gayatri in Om, and Om in Samadhi. It is like the sound of a bell. Tang. The yogi, by following in the trail of the sound Om, gradually merges himself in the Supreme Brahman. His sandhya and other ritualistic duties disappear in Samadhi. Thus, the duties of the Jnani come to an end. As the master talked of Samadhi, he himself went into that state. His face radiated a heavenly light. Bereft of outer consciousness, he could not utter another word. His gaze was indrawn and transfixed in communion with the self. After a long time, the master began to recognize the world around him, and he said like a child, "I shall have a drink of water." Whenever after Samadhi the master asked for a drink of water, his devotees knew that he was gradually becoming conscious of the outer world. Still lingering in this state of ecstasy, he said to the Divine Mother, "O Mother, the other day you showed me Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Then I told you that I should like to see another Pandit, and so you have brought me here." Looking at the Pandit, he said, "My child, add a little more strength. Practice spiritual discipline a few days more." You have hardly set your foot on the tree, and yet you expect to lay hold of a big cluster of fruit. But of course, you're doing all of this for the welfare of others. With these words, he bowed his head before the Pandit. The master continued, "When I first heard about you, I inquired whether you were merely erudite or whether you had discernment and renunciation. A Pandit who doesn't know how to discern between the real and the unreal is no Pandit at all. There is no harm in teaching others if the preacher has a commission from the Lord. Nobody can confound a preacher who teaches people after having received the command of God. Getting a ray of light from the goddess of learning, a man becomes so powerful that before him big scholars seem like mere earthworms. When the lamp is lighted, the moths come in swarms. They don't have to be invited. In the same way, the preacher who has a commission from God need not invite people to hear him. He doesn't have to announce the time of his lectures. He possesses such an irresistible attraction that people come to him of their own accord. People of all classes, even kings and aristocrats, gather around him. They say to him, "Revered sir, what can we offer you? Here are mangoes, sweets, money, shawls, and other things. What will you be pleased to accept?" In that case, I say to them, "Go away. I don't care for these. I don't want anything." Does the magnet say to the iron, "Come near me"? That is not necessary. Because of the attraction of the magnet, the iron rushes to it. Such a preacher may not be a scholarly person, but don't conclude from that he has any lack of wisdom. Does book learning make one wise? He who has a commission from God never runs short of wisdom. The wisdom comes from God. It is inexhaustible. At Karmarpakor, I have seen people measuring grain. It lies in a heap. One man keeps pushing one grain from the heap toward another man who weighs it on the scales. And so the man who weighs doesn't run short of grain. It is the same with the preacher who has received a commission from God. As he teaches people, the Divine Mother herself supplies him with knowledge, fresh knowledge from behind. That knowledge never comes to an end. Can a preacher ever lack knowledge if but once he is favored with the benign glance of the Divine Mother? Therefore, I ask you, have you received any commission from God? Azra, oh yes, he must have it. To the pundit, isn't that true, sir? Pundit, commission? No, sir. I'm afraid I haven't received any such thing. Host, he may not have received the commission, but he preaches from a sense of duty. Master, what will a man accomplish by mere lectures without the commission from God? Once a Brahmo preacher said in the course of his sermon, friends, how much I used to drink, and so on. Hearing this, the people began to whisper among themselves, what is this fool saying? He used to drink. Now these words produced a very unfavorable effect. This shows that preaching cannot bring a good result unless it comes from a good man. A high government official from Barisal once said to me, sir, if you begin the work of preaching, I too shall gird my loins. I told him the story of people's dirtying the bank of the Haldupur, and of its being stopped only when a constable, armed with authority from the government, put a notice up prohibiting it. So I say, a worthless man may talk his head off preaching, and yet he will produce no effect. But people will listen to him if he is armed with the badge of authority from God. One cannot teach others without the commission from God. A teacher of men must have great power. There's many Hanuman Puri in Calcutta. It is with them that you will have to wrestle. Pointing to the people assembled here, these are mere sheep. Chaitanya Deva was an incarnation of God. How little is left of what he accomplished, not to speak of a lecturer who preaches without authority from God. What good would a lecturer do? Therefore, I say to you, dive deep in God consciousness. Saying this, the master began to sing in the ecstasy of love for God. Dive deep, O mind. Dive deep in the ocean of God's beauty. If you descend to the utmost depths, there you will find the gem of love. The master continued, one does not die if one sinks in this ocean. This is the ocean of immortality. Once I said to Narendra, God is the ocean of bliss. Tell me if you want to plunge into it. Just imagine there is some syrup in a cup and that you have become a fly. Now tell me, where will you sit to sip the syrup? Narendra answered, I'll sit on the edge of the cup and stretch out my neck to drink, because I'm sure to die if I go far into that cup. Then I said to him, oh, my child, this is the ocean of Satchitananda. There is no fear of death in it. This is the ocean of immortality. Only ignorant people say that one should not have an excess of devotion and divine love. How foolish. Can there be any excess of divine love? To the pundit, therefore I say to you, dive deep in the ocean of Satchitananda. Nothing will ever worry you if you but realize God. Then you will get his commission to teach people.